Hello, and thanks for joining us today on the Higher Ground podcast. My name is Tom Castriota, and I got the idea for this podcast during a coaching session that I had with one of my mentees. It's a simple idea, really. I interview my friends to cover all sorts of topics about life at work and provide advice to help you reach your career potential. So whether you're preparing for an interview, seeking a promotion, or just curious about what's in the minds of hiring managers, executives, or other interview candidates, then this podcast is for you. Join us as we explore real career journeys, one story at a time. Oh, and from our lawyers, views expressed on the Higher Ground podcast are the personal opinions of myself and our guests and don't necessarily represent the views of their employers, past or present. And if you like the show, please like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Higher Ground podcast. I'm very happy to present my friend John Biedebach. John and I worked together, what did I say, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, what feels like a very, very long time ago, a company called Alpha Blocks. We were innovators in software, and John will do a much better job introducing himself than I ever could. So maybe you introduce yourself, John, and give us a bit of a sketch of your background.
Yeah, I've got a weird background. I graduated with a degree in communications, got into internal IT, and then started mid-90s doing software pre-sales, and did that for 25 years-ish. After 9/11, I decided I wanted to become a volunteer firefighter. And so I went to the fire academy, and I went to EMT school, then I went to paramedic school. Then ultimately I went to nursing school. And so in addition to doing software sales, I was at Oracle for 10 years, Amazon Web Services for 5 years. I also became a paramedic and a nurse, and I would do that nights and weekends. And about 5 years ago, kind of maybe mid-COVID, I decided that I wanted to get further into healthcare. And so I ended up going back to school, getting a master's in public health, and now I sell, I carry a bag, and I sell medical research to pharmaceutical companies. So I draw on that kind of tech sales background, but I also draw on my 18 years of patient care experience and healthcare experience, and now the master's degree.
Sounds like a really great combination going in both paths, right? Things come together, your passion and your experience coming together. I think that's fantastic. I distinctly remember those days as like pre-sales. I'm a few years out of that as well. And it was some of the most fun I think I ever had in my life. You know, working with salespeople, coming up with these wonderful tales of everything your software could do. And we had to then try to figure out how to actually make those tales come true.
Well, it's funny because I recently, just on LinkedIn, somebody posted something like, should sales engineers be qualified for club? And as you may remember, I went to Hawaii twice with Alpha Block. Yeah. And I think it's a very interesting relationship because ultimately I carry a bag. I believe in the value of the salesperson. I would never besmirch that and say, oh, it's easy. And I think it's a very common thing for sales engineers. I stuff money in my rep's pocket. And believe me, there are some cases where that happens, but there are also some cases where, I've gotten fired from clients before too for, misjudging or underrepresenting or whatever. And so, it's a very, when it works well, it's a partnership. And I've benefited from some great reps that I've worked with. And I think I've been a great SE at times. I was an SE manager for a long time. And so I think the sales relationships, like any relationship, it's all about trust. You have to gain that trust. And I think the sales engineer provides that credible voice in the sale that helps you gain that trust.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. I think when it hums really well too. When you've got the sales rep who knows their bounds and they're like, look, I'm in a situation where maybe we're stretching, and John, I need you to come in and help me, help me make sure we're operating within the bounds of reality. Other times, and when it's been really fun is when you've got that ability to finish each other's like sort of bad
Yeah.
jokes, or, I had some of my funner moments, some of the funniest and most fun moments in my career were back in the day with,
Yeah.
presentations and
It's the classic stories of, the rep is so excited to get to this part, and that part really isn't well done, or maybe it's not completely finished, and
yeah,
so they're like, show them the thing, and you're like,
that
well,
thing.
maybe we'll save the thing for another time, and you're
Yeah,
like,
come
no,
on.
show me the thing, and you're like, are you sure this is what you want? You want to okay, and you push the button, and it goes, and all the air goes out of the room.
Yeah,
And
yeah. The wah
it's the old
wah.
Kevin Costner he hit that like he knew I was throwing a fastball. Yeah, he did know. I told him. So
That's great. Awesome. So what I'd like to do is like start us off with just a little bit of getting to know John, and a couple of simple questions. They're controversial for some, so I'll throw this one out here. So this or that kind of questions. Would you choose? What's your preference, pizza or bagels?
pizza. Yeah,
So
pizza for sure.
no controversy. It's not a
Well,
challenge.
I think it's all where you grew up. Like I didn't grow up in the land of excellent bagels, right? So
Sure.
New York, East Coast. I cherish my time there, and yes, every time I'm there, I go down, I get a bagel and some schmear, and yeah, fantastic. And I also like a slice,
Sure.
But I went to college in Chicago, so to me, pizza takes it to a whole nother level. So, and I know, talk about controversy. There's a big controversy between, a lot of people don't fully appreciate the Chicago pizza, but, yeah, absolutely. Pizza all day.
I've never met pizza I didn't like, with one exception, when they put fruit on it. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. Or
That's just,
anchovies or something like that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I don't know. Anchovies are different. But anyways, next question. So beer or wine?
I don't drink.
You don't
And
drink.
it's not because I'm, against it per se. I never started. I went to a school where my friends didn't drink, and for both high school and college.
Hmm.
And so I think, if you and I have both seen a lot of career injuries caused by alcohol.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I didn't think it was something I needed to add into the repertoire at 25 years old. And
Sure.
so, but yeah, I get my calories primarily through pizza and bagels. So I didn't need to, my wife is famous for, we'll go to some restaurant and they'll come out and they'll give us, they'll tell us about the drink of the day, and it's
Mm.
it's got this, and it's got a splash of that, and it's got a twist of this, and it's $17. And I'm like, you're not gonna like it. And then she gets it and she goes, this tastes like alcohol. Okay, yeah, tastes
Did
like
I warn you, or
alcohol.
did I not warn you? Yeah. Yeah. It's a relationship that for me, I developed at a very young age, a too young age. And, I've finally taken it to the point where, like, oh, I like this and I don't like that. I have an
Yeah,
opinion,
yeah.
versus, just in it for the buzz, so to speak.
I think
All
the
right.
other
So
thing too, and
yeah.
this will resonate with you being a kid of the 60s and 70s. We collected cans when I was a kid, aluminum
Yes.
cans.
Yes.
And so as a result, my garage smelled like stale beer for years.
Ooh,
And
oof.
so every time, believe me, a good Corona on a hot day, I can understand the appeal for sure. But, Pabst Blue Ribbon, maybe not as much. So.
Yeah, I don't, and now that's the hipster drink. So if you're into it, great. Like, I'm less of a lager man. I'm more of a, but to each his own, as they say,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, this is a softball, but yellow cab or Uber?
Uh, I would say Uber. It's
Yeah,
merely because it's primarily the payment and the tipping.
right.
Uber. I I think in the beginning it took me a long time to adopt Uber because you're getting in somebody else's car. It's like
Right.
they tell you your entire life don't hitchhike, and now you're hitchhiking.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but at the same time, I saw just the quality of the experience and the fact that I don't have to pay in cash. I don't have to worry about the meter. It's all taken care of. And ultimately, in fact, we're down to one car now. I work out
Same.
of the house, and my wife doesn't work full time, and so we downsized to one car. And there are occasions, like if I have to go to the airport, I'll take an Uber. Obviously, if I'm traveling, I don't rent a car as much now. I'll take
Sure.
an Uber. But I think it's really that fractional. And I think one of the things that's going to bust the fractional market wide open is if you own a Tesla, I think eventually you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm not going anywhere for the next 4 hours. I'm going to turn on taxi mode, and that Tesla is just going to go and earn me money and do what it does. And it's going to come back in 4 hours, and then I'm going to be able to go where I want to go.
The concept is like, this is, the concept is phenomenal. Like, the question is, can he execute? Right. So,
well, and maybe it's not in 5 minutes, maybe it's in 5 years, but I think it is coming. I don't think that, that here's the thing. People talk about the big, beautiful bill, or they talk about AI, or they talk about robo-taxis or whatever. It's not an if, it's a when. And so I think we are just better served if you know something's coming to figure out how you're going to adapt it, and also trust that humanity is going to be able to fix it. If we screw up a piece of legislation, or if we screw up robo-taxis, or if we screw something up, we're resilient. We're going to be able to fix it.
Yeah, I think the resilience Americans have shown over years has been positive, very positive. Yeah. Thanks. No, thank you for the feedback there. Dogs or cats?
Dogs. We had
quick answer.
No, my kids. We had cats growing up, primarily my daughter, but dog is man's best friend. I think cats are secretly plotting to kill you, and sometimes not so secretly.
I think they can't hide it. It's eventually they show their quote unquote true colors, right? They are definitely
the other thing, and you may want to cut this out. This is a little macabre, but I can tell you, as a first responder, I have come across a couple different situations where somebody maybe had passed away a little while ago, and dogs will wait before they eat you. Cats will not wait. They dig right in.
Oh my God, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that, but wow. Thank you for that.
We got to provide some sort of clean break, some sort of so you can edit that out.
I think that's wow. Yeah, I bet you've got some really really interesting first responder stories.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I'm assuming the answer to this next one, but I usually ask it. I mean, it's a modern world. Not everyone feels the same way, but in-person interview or over phone or like GVC?
I don't think there's any substitute for the in-person interview. When I was at Oracle, or when I was at Amazon, I was what's called bar raiser. So I was on their hiring team. And I did over 350 interviews, most of them in person. Whoa. And I just feel like that rapport that you get. But unfortunately now, we live in it's like anything else. It's like robotaxis or anything else. The convenience of the video interview it's unbeatable. And I am disappointed, and I know there's a hiring focus to this. I'm really, really disappointed at what I see in terms of the hiring style that's going on right now, because on my last job search, I went 7 interviews deep, and I felt like they never really liked me enough to hire me, obviously. But you give anybody enough interviews and they're going to screw something up, and I did, and I screwed it up, and it's on me. But at the same time, I was the same person after the first interview and the second interview and the fourth interview and the fifth interview. And so, I think it gives the illusion that if you get enough people involved in the decision, if you ask enough questions, that you're going to be able to derive the perfect candidate. And there are no perfect candidates.
Candidates.
Every one of us is a broken human being. And so no matter how great I was in the interview, I'm going to disappoint you eventually. And, that's what I really liked about the Amazon hiring process was, back in the day, it was done in one day. They've since kind of changed the schedule with virtual interviews. But when you did it in person, I walked in at 9:00 in the morning. I walked out at 3:00 in the afternoon. And that was it. 5 days later, you knew. And I always really respected that.
So we can cover any ground, and I'm very curious to take your thoughts on that. So what is it, if you don't mind pardon my ignorance here, but what is a bar raiser? What does that mean?
So the Amazon hiring process is very, very regimented. They go off of, they have these leadership principles, or the LPs as they call them. And so all the questions, you won't get any questions like, how many ping pong balls do you think can fit in this room? It's questions like, tell me about a time you had to disappoint a customer, or tell me about a time where, you had to, break bad news or make a tough decision or whatnot. And the questions are phrased a little bit differently, but they're all tied back to these leadership principles. So, things like learn and be curious, and passionate customer advocacy and whatnot. So I like the science of it in terms of trying to derive data directly, through more than just a touchy feely. Now, we're human beings, and so I've seen several times where people will take a question and they'll weave it backwards to support their bias, right? If they want to hire somebody, they'll make the answer out to be a little bit better than it was, or if they don't want to hire somebody, they'll raise concerns. But I really liked that aspect of it. And then the bar raiser is a lay person, so they're not part of HR, but they are a lay person that's trained. I think I had to do like 50 or 100 interviews before I could be trained as a bar raiser. And then I did another 350 as a bar raiser. And so the bar raiser is in there to kind of ensure that we are hiring people that are as good or preferably better than the people we have now, so that you're continuously raising the bar. And this comes out of there's that top grading, I think, which was running around IBM for a while or something like that. But it's the notion of, if we hired you 5 years ago and you brought the same thing that you brought 5 years ago, now we wouldn't hire you, because we as an organization have evolved, and we expect the quality of the employee is involved.
To grow with that, as we evolve and grow. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting about Amazon Web Services specifically is I watched that company really change over the time I was there. Nothing bad to say about them. Loved every day of it. But the more people, especially in leadership, that you hire from the outside, I think the harder it is to kind of maintain that uniquely Amazonian culture.
Sure.
And it's something, a very, very strong culture is something that's hard to maintain, especially if you hire leaders from the outside. I think you're almost doomed. I think the easiest way to do it is, and Amazon was accused of being a cult, in terms of how passionate their people were to certain Amazonian things. And I've heard the same thing about Googlers and whatnot. The problem is as you hire people who grew up elsewhere, it's hard to, and I'm sure, with your family, for instance, when you got married and you started having kids, you came in with a certain set of expectations. Your wife came in with a set of expectations, and the way you raised your kids was not the way that either you were raised or she was raised. And so
100%, yeah.
you get a little bit of that dilution. And so, I think when you hire somebody who grows up at Oracle and you bring them into a culture like Amazon, they're going to talk about the Amazonian things, and they're going to try and be Amazonian, but they're going to be a 1 or 2 year old Amazonian and a 25-year-old Oracleian
person. Sure.
And which culture is going to wear out or win out.
And it does change over time. Like you'll morph, but like I will say from a company that I worked at I did a 3-ish year run at Bridgewater Associates, and it's famous for their culture and the principles and that. And it took a lot of shifting, right? And a lot of people wash out quickly. And the benefit I got from it, there were a lot of positives to the culture, but it's like you said, especially when you're coming in with the mindset of, I'm also an experienced hire. I've been around the block for a couple of years. I know how things work, and getting back to first, principles are why should I do things this way? Why do I have to explain myself? It's like, no, this is the culture, right? And getting to the why behind things is useful. So I appreciate that. And I will say, back to your original comment about like the hiring process, I've been like, it sounds like, that one day kind of thing, once and done, is amazing. Because I can't tell you how many times I personally and other people that I've talked to have been through like you said earlier, the 7th interview, and you're like, okay. And I often wonder, is the desire to find that reason that John washes out or Tom washes out, right? Or are you trying to like come to a point where like there's that uncertainty? You'll never push out, like I think of your point, right? You'll never push out the uncertainty. The question is, are you looking to hire Tom, or are you looking to not hire Tom? And is that why you're having the 7th interview?
Yeah. Right? So to put it kind of another way, what I used to tell people when they were prepping for interviews at Amazon is, look, they want to hire you. You just have to give them reasons to hire you, and they will do it. That's why they brought you here. That's why they've spent the money.
That's good.
That's why they've impaneled us. And it was all about, one of the biggest things that you can do as a, so what's the acronym? STAR. So situation, task, action, results.
I have heard that. Yes.
Yeah,
Is that a
so
uniquely Amazon thing, or is that
it's not, but it is very popular at Amazon, and that's how you're
mm,
supposed to answer questions and with as much data as you can. So, for
mhm,
instance, tell me about a time when you had to break bad news to a customer. Okay,
mhm,
that's the question. Okay, now here's the situation. You don't literally say situation, task, action, result, but in your head as you're formulating the answer, the situation was the customer had very, very specific expectations in terms of our timing to deliver this feature. And I found out that we weren't going to deliver it. And so then my task was to go and reset expectations with the customer. My actions, what I did was I held a meeting. I went and I reviewed our progress. I brought them in early in the process, and da 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 da. And the result was that through that experience, yes, it was tough, but we were able to then gain an additional project because they knew that even though we didn't live up to our original schedule, we were trustworthy and we
mm,
would share things with them. Nothing's going to go perfectly, but a
sure.
lot of times that friction in the relationship, we were able to then, and here's the data part, we were able to then grow that relationship by 40% over the next year because we used that as a springboard to talk about, why this feature is important to them. And then through that, we realized that it could be used in all these other places.
That's fantastic. You brought it back to me. I remember, like, it's a very good way to communicate. Like, as a candidate, like, just
Yeah.
having that in your head is a good way to frame the
Well, because
experience.
otherwise it devolves into, and we used to talk about this openly at Oracle. It's the would I like to have a beer with this guy factor.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of that goes on in hiring. The reality is, though, the average tenure. I mean, I've been working now for 35 years, and in those 35 years, I'll bet you I've had 30 managers, and so we may be best buddies, right? But I mean, this is case in point. You hired me at Alpha Blocks, and I
Yeah.
worked for you for maybe a year, right? And then John Goble came in, and I worked for him. So you can't ever. It's very rare in my career, and at least that you have that kind of tenure, that boss subordinate relationship that lasts for years and years and years. So why are you hiring your friends? Let's hire the people that do the best job. Let's hire people that can be trustworthy. Let's hire people that have a passion for customers, and
Mhm.
then let's set them loose and empower them. And if we develop friendships over time, that's great. But if we don't, our customers still getting the best.
That's right. No, that's right.
And I think we've weaponized so much of corporate decision making now. And I think honestly, video calls have almost exacerbated this because we have unlimited connectability, right? I can now solicit an opinion from in the span of 24 hours, right? I can survey all over the US, all over Europe, all over Asia, and get immediate feedback. We can all jump online. We can all come to consensus. The downside of that, though, is where's the finish line? Like, when do we say good enough is good enough?
Sure.
Or because there's always additional feedback that we can try and gather. And
Sure.
the problem is, at some point, you just got to twist it off and say, no, this is what we're going to do. We have enough
Yep.
data to rule in or rule out, and this is the way we're going to go.
Yeah, and that's leadership, right? I mean, when in the absence of all that data, we would still make decisions. We would still execute, a plan or path or whatnot.
Yeah.
Yes, I do think weaponization is an interesting way to put it. I do think there's way more information, way more opportunity for feedback, which, like you said, has its positives. But then if you get lost in it, then it's no longer operating to your
And
benefit.
part of it is too. I think this is a reaction, the pendulum swinging the other way to
Mhm.
picture the hiring that was happening during 2020, 2021. I mean, initially there were layoffs because of COVID, but I mean, it seemed like at Amazon 2021, I mean, we doubled down and we went on a massive hiring spree. And I've seen that happen in other good economic times where basically it's like, okay, we interview somebody, we've got to make him an offer because he or she an offer because they've got four other offers that they're mulling over and they're going to
Yeah.
go immediately, right? And so we got to get the best candidate. It's not that way right now. I read a very interesting article at Microsoft about Microsoft, that they were laying off, and the reason that was given for the layoffs was AI. And
Mm.
everybody thought, oh, well, AI is taking jobs. Well, no, that's not the case. The case is AI takes such massive investments, and Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Oracle are making such big bets. They don't have the money to pay all the people. It's not that you can ask ChatGPT to go close that deal or go do that demo. It's that we don't have the people, we don't have the money to pay them because we're having to spend billions and billions of dollars building data centers and buying chips and procuring water and
Capital.
power and those types of things.
Yeah.
And so far, I don't think AI has paid off. But big tech is really tough right now.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I'm glad I got out of big tech. Part of the reason, the other thing too is when I was a sales engineer, when I was a sales rep, there was nothing that I was doing that you couldn't hire a 35-year-old guy to do. And now in my role, I have 30 years of sales experience. I've got 20 years of healthcare experience. I've got a master's degree in healthcare. You're not finding a 35-year-old guy to replace me. And it's not that I can't be replaced. It's just that I'm doing something now that I'm passionate about, that I have some expertise in. And I think that always works out better for you. One of the things that I get the opportunity to counsel a lot of people that are kind of in between jobs or want to change. And the first question I used to ask them is, like, what do you want to do? All other things being equal, what do you want to do? And yeah, you know what? You're probably not going to play in the NFL or you're not going to be a fighter pilot. That doesn't mean that you can't work adjacent to the NFL. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar business, and there are tons of jobs that are adjacent to the NFL. Or you can't, work for a defense contractor and build fighter jets if that's really what you want to do. There's plenty of other ways to scratch that itch. And I think you've got to have some passion. If you are just going and turning a number 6 bolt, all day long, I think that's a tough road to hoe. I did find a great resource, and that is there's a book, and I think I recommended it to you. It's called Never Search Alone, and it's on Amazon. The great thing about the book, there's nothing in the book that is earth-shattering. It's all very, very common sense. The thing I loved about the book is it's a process. You open it up, it gives you step 1, step 2, step 3, and then if you buy the book, they will pair you with a peer group. And so when I was going through a job search, I was in a group with 3 or 4 other people. We met weekly, every other week, and it was just, I cannot tell you how soul fulfilling it was to talk to 4 other people that were going through exactly the same thing that I was going through at that time. So I highly recommend that book now to anybody. It's called Never Search Alone. It's by Phil somebody or other. But you'll find it. Never Search Alone.
Yes. Never Search Alone. Yes, I'll put that in the meeting notes as well in our the recap. But I do think having that group, right, that you're searching with, like, because we'll have our friends, whatnot. I think the community is incredibly important, and I love this idea about pairing with other folks. I think that's
and the other thing that it does is you in the process you fill out this 2-pager, and the 2-pager basically breaks down to 4 columns. It's things I think I'm good at, things I think I'm not good at, things I want in my next job, and things I will not abide in my next job. And then it kind of walks you through. It's got some rows in addition to those columns.
Sure.
What it does then is it prompts you to go on what's called a listening tour. And so the notion of the listening tour is you take your 2-pager and you say, hey, Tom, I've got this 2-pager. I want to go over it with you. It's part of my homework for this group. And what is the very first thing you say anytime you hear anybody got laid off? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Go through my LinkedIn. If there's anything I can do for you, but there's really nothing that you can do. This gives you something to do, right? So I can sit down and I have this format now, and I've got this 2-pager, and I say, these are the things that I think I'm good at. And you go, yeah, you know what? I mean, I saw that when we worked together.
I've seen that in action. You've done this. Yep. You've demonstrated that behavior. Yep.
These are the things I really think I'm not good at. And you can say, oh boy, yeah, you're not good at this. Or maybe you're being too hard on yourself. Or why do you think you're not good at that? Or why do you think you're good at that? Because I know you like to do that, but you weren't ever the top performer in that area. And then the things that you want. So one of the things that I wanted in this job was stock as part of my compensation.
Mm.
because I feel like I've been at enough companies that give out options or give out other forms of compensation. Stock is just something, it's almost free to companies. Like it has an impact on their balance sheet, but I feel like they're
It's
much
trivial.
more they're much more generous with it. Especially when I made more money from stock at Amazon than I did from salary, and so that's part of what I wanted. I also wanted to work for a public company, ergo the stock, but I
Sure.
didn't want to work for private equity because I feel like private equity. It forces you. They have a very, very distinct thing, idea of what they want, right? And so
Mhm.
they are going to make the company do what they need it to do in order to perform in the way it needs to perform, whether that impacts your job or not.
And
And
there's a
so,
profile and there's a background and there's a
yeah.
certain clubbiness to it. And not that there's anything like that's a path and that might not be the path for you. Right. And so that
So
for some folks, that's a draw.
yeah. So then I sit down with you and I go through this whole thing. What have I done? I've now educated you on what I want, and it may not set off any alarm bells for you, but
I'm
maybe in
aware.
5 minutes, maybe in the afternoon. Or I can tell you, I got 3 or 4 different job opportunities or like interview opportunities from sitting down and talking to people. And they're like, oh, we have a job like that in my company right now. And I
That's
didn't
great.
even know you were looking for it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they were able to set it up. So I really like that part of it.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I love that idea. And I have to say, John, the couple of points that you raised, like the passion, I think is critical,
Yeah.
right? But this framework, I think, it allows you then to narrow it. Like you
Yeah.
said, I think it's a very astute observation that people will come to me as well and be like, "Hey, I'm looking for a thing." If we take more than just a quick call, right? For me, it's well, tell me what you're looking for, not the
Yeah.
title. Like, what is the kind of work? And I don't get into the why do you think you can do it. I'm hoping that they're either they've thought about that in advance, but like if I'm mentoring somebody, then that's different, right? Then we'll go into that level of detail. But if you're searching, I definitely like it's helpful to not just use title.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking for a program manager or that. Um, apparently I'm working out right now, so let me stop. Oh,
Apparently,
traditional strength training. Look at that. I'm
apparently, I'm having a heart attack right now.
yeah, right. But no, but I think that's it's an interesting. I like the community. I like the giving you tools to narrow your view. I think that's an excellent one. I do think there's a bit of I do think there's like you need to be realistic as well. Like you said, I like your NFL example. It reminds me of the George Costanza when he got laid off from I don't know if you remember the Seinfeld episode, but like, well, what do you want to do? It's like, well, I like talking about sports. Maybe I could be a sportscaster.
And
you
that's,
know?
I think that is a real trap. Almost the opposite of that, though, is a real trap because there is an air of desperation when you're looking for a job, whether you're trying to trade up or you're out of a job. There is this notion of, well, I can do anything, right?
Yeah.
I've sold cloud, I've sold database, I've sold this, I've sold that, I've got healthcare experience, I've got oil and gas experience, and you end up looking like the jack of all trades who's good at
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
And so if you have this template, you can then take this template and either use AI or use a resume writer, or they have resources in the book and stuff like that. And you
Yeah.
can say, this is now what I'm looking for, right? So I have a template of exactly what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
I'm going to write a resume that says these things because that's what I'm looking for. And
Yeah.
you can
Yeah. Yeah.
tailor to the job. They have this thing called candidate fit analysis where you can look and see, am I a good fit? And then my advice would be only apply to things where you are a good fit, where it's
Mhm.
what you truly want,
Yeah.
and also where you know somebody on the inside. Because I do not believe now that you can apply online and have any sort of shot of getting it.
That's
I
a
think
sad
it's
truth, but
got to be an internal referral.
yeah, it's definitely a sad truth. I think you're right. The volume, like if you ever see that looks like an interesting job, let me look and see what it's all about.
Yeah,
700 people have applied already. I'm like, it launched this morning.
yeah,
Like, yeah, I think it's tough though. Like, especially when you're starting out, like you're fresh in your career, you don't have the network, you don't have
Right.
you may not have the somebody in there. So it's a bit tricky, but I do think that the finding that balance and then being flexible, like, I don't, the being open to trying something new, or to finding, or having that, at least that conversation with a partner, or a friend, as well as yourself. Like, do I really think I could do this? Cause I can't tell you how many people just come stretching. They're
Yeah.
like, I think, I'm pretty sure I could be a good CEO. I'm like, well, you were a salesman first. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean you can't be, but like, let's maybe get into sales management next. you know?
Well, the other thing I would tell you is that bad bosses don't last. Good bosses don't last, and bad bosses don't last. And I have quit jobs before that I shouldn't have, because,
Interesting.
um, you know, and what's funny is I didn't follow this advice early in my career. It was different times, Tom. It was different times.
Different time.
Um, but I worked at a company. Well, let's go all the way back, right? So I started my career at McDonnell Douglas. I was there for a little over 2 years. Next place was a year. Next place was 3 years. The next place was 2.5. The next place was Alpha Blocks. That was 2.5. Next place was year and a half. Then a year. So now it's 15 years, right? And I've had 8 jobs,
Yeah.
and I get to Oracle, and they're not going to hire me. Like, they like me, but they're not going to hire me, because the lady literally told me this. She's like, "Look, you've had 8 jobs in 15 years. 5 years from now, you're just going to be figuring out where the bathroom is in this place. We need people that will stay." And I said,
Mm.
I promise on, on anything that's holy, on my family, on whatever, I will stay in this job. And I was there for 10 years, and she's still there. But I finally, after 10 years, I had an opportunity to go do something else. And so I wrote her and I said, "Hey, I've done 10 years. I know I said I wouldn't leave without your permission." She goes, "You have my blessing.
You
have
have
done
my
your
money. You put in the decade. So
Yeah."
that's
But then,
amazing. But like, that goes to that human connection, right? Because it's tough. The job hopping is a problem, especially
yeah,
like, and I look back over my CV as well, and I'm like, I don't know. I think if I don't, I'd have to go back and look more. I'll pick a number 10 companies. At least 5 of them no longer exist. In that, company
yeah.
A was bought by company B. Company B was bought by, like, Red Brick and Alpha Blocks. Both were consumed eventually by IBM, right?
Well, if you look at my resume, it looks like I worked for IBM for like 18 years. And, you know,
Yeah, like
because
an
I had
IBM company, an IBM company, an IBM division. Like, yeah,
3 or 4, yeah. And I've never once collected a paycheck from IBM.
same. Yeah, I think I had at least 2. There might have been a third that also got absorbed. But yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. But I do think that you were able to, in that brief amount of time, make that personal connection with that hiring manager, to say, look, I hear your concern, and credit to her for being direct with you, because a lot of times, and this is my word to hiring managers out there everywhere: be honest with your candidates. Tell them, give them the feedback. Feedback is a blessing. Here's the problem I see. Because then you have 2 things. They got feedback, which is critical. And 2, they can address it in case you might not be 100% accurate.
Well, I need to tell you, there's slightly more to that story, and that is, I did not get feedback directly from her.
Oh,
We had a friend in common, and so Susan Cook, who you may remember, she was a VP at Hyperion. I knew her. She was here in Dallas. We did a lot of business together. She really liked me. She had a relationship with this lady, Robin Link, knew her very well. And so I could tell that it wasn't going my way. Like, I was getting kind of the from the recruiter. And so I called Susan and I said, "Can you call Robin for me and just find out what's up?" And Susan came back and said, "They're not going to hire you. Like, you haven't," and told me the story about it. Literally, like, use the words, "You're not going to be able to find the bathroom, in the first 3 years." And which I feel like I would have. But anyway, so I pled with Susan. I'm like, "You have to go to the mat for me." And she's like, "I will do this, but if you betray me, I will kill you." And I believe her.
Kill you. Yeah.
And
Threats of violence are effective. I mean, they work.
yeah. So we did. We worked it out, and I was there for 10 years, and then I left. Was at MarkLogic for 2.5, and then at Amazon for 5, and I am going to be where I am until the end. I turned 58 in October. if we're allowed to say that. And I've got to
Sure.
work another 9 years, and then I'll hang it up, go do something else.
I like that you have a schedule out there. My plan is to keep going until I'm bored, or they won't have me. Like, either I get bored or they get bored, right?
Well, and
Um,
that's the thing is I don't think that I will at 67 just hang up the cleats and ride off into the sunset and garden. I haven't done that. Like, what were your hobbies? Well, my hobby was climbing on an ambulance or climbing on a fire truck or working a shift in the ER.
sure.
But what I do want is eventually the flexibility to travel. My grandkids now are 5, 3, and 3 months, and so let's project forward, right? What happens in 9 years? Well, they're 14, 12, and 9, and then I've got maybe a couple others, and so there's going to be that desire to kind of have a reduced schedule. But I would love to consult or do some other stuff,
Yeah.
and maybe that's paid, maybe it's not. Maybe I go in and I'll tell you, the job that I would love is kind of board member, advisor, bullshit checker for startups.
Hmm.
You know, that
That is
unfortunately,
a job. That is
yeah.
definitely a
Unfortunately,
job.
you got to give a lot of money usually to have a job like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But I would love to kind of be a resource of somebody who they've got $1 million idea, but they can't seem to get it off the ground, and I'd love to go in and work a couple 3 days a week, or work a week a month, or do something like that, and take some sort of massive back end payout and just invest time.
Yeah. There's my aunt, very proud of her. She's in her 80s and she was the Putnam County, New York Senior of the Year, Senior Volunteer of the Year,
Okay.
right? And they picked a man and a woman, and the gentleman who won the male the male spot, he was basically a startup, or not a startup, a advisor to local companies.
Okay.
And it wasn't him personally, but he created a network of advisors.
Yeah.
And these were retirees, volunteers, generally speaking, or near retirees. And they would just coach, hey, I want to get into this market. I want to bring this product to market. And again, we're a small county, bedroom community, but there's plenty of small businesses here. And this was like, and I thought this was just, how fun would that be?
Yeah.
Like, again, it's volunteer work, but I like that whole concept of taking your experience, your wisdom, and helping someone grow a business, or change direction, or maybe raise money, or whatever the cases may be, is, I found it to be a fascinating exit strategy, and he's been very successful at, amplifying his own knowledge by the
Yeah.
network, right? And that's what the network will do for you.
I think the toughest thing with that, though, is you got to find somebody that's willing to make hard choices, because I think there's so many people that come into this startup, and they're going to be the next Yahoo millionaire, and they've got this idea. And I was talking to a guy not long ago who is somebody I really, really respect, and he had an idea, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, he was so convinced of it, and we kind of went back and forth, and because he wanted me to get involved, and I was willing to get involved, but it just, the more he talked about it, I'm like, well, there's kind of like other people that already do that, and so I had the idea of take the same thing, right,
Sure.
use it in a different way, and then that didn't resonate with him, and so
Yeah.
after a while he got busy and I got busy, and so we just kind of didn't work together. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's the toughest thing is there are those brilliant mad scientists, right? Mark Zuckerberg, who against all odds creates this massive when I'm sure that there were a ton of naysayers, like social media, what's a naysayer, and or what's a what's that, or Napster, then becoming ultimately music streaming, with a lot of interruptions in between. But there are those examples. There are millions more examples of I always tell people there's two kinds of mousetraps, better mousetraps, right? There's the better mousetrap that kills twice as many mice, and there's the better mousetrap that kills the same mouse twice as dead. And they obviously have dramatically different value props.
Twice as dead?
Twice as dead, yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, you got the mousetrap that kills twice as many mice. That's valuable, right?
Sure.
But you got the same, got the mousetrap that kills the same mouse twice as dead. There's no additional value in that. right? Like,
Got it. Yeah. And like there's that much more dead mouse.
yes,
Like
once
it's
the mouse
twice
is
as
dead,
dead. Okay.
right?
Got you. Got you. Got
Once
you.
the mouse is dead, you can
Yeah.
move on. You don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to, you know, incinerate the mouse and plan a mouse funeral and do, you know, just
Kill him again. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you. I didn't quite, I got it now. I'm a little slow. I got you. I got you.
that's okay.
So having interviewed so many people, what would you say was the most like interesting, funny, odd interview that you've had? I mean, you've like, you've done a lot of interviewing in your day, and we're
Yeah.
not going to name names. I'd just be curious, some entertaining stories or insightful or
So
tips to our
I
audience. Don't do this, maybe.
I always find the best interviews are the people that bring data. Like I
Mm.
said, it's that situation, task, action, results. And every time they told a story, there was a point to it.
Mm.
You know, you get into a lot of stuff, and you ask, you know, tell me about a time when you had to. And I wish I could remember all the questions, and they're actually out there. I mean, you can go on the internet and find most of the Amazon interview questions, but they would tell you this long story, and it was like get to the point, and what was the result, and like, and so one of the tricks, and if you're ever in an Amazon interview, this is how you know you haven't provided enough data. Is the interviewer will say, "Well, tell me what was hard about that."
Mm.
You know, and they will. That's part of it. Is, you know, the best interviews were something where you could ask one question and spend 15 minutes asking a bunch of questions that branched off of that and dig down and get some really good nuggets. I mean, and then
Mm.
there were people that, you know, they just, their stories didn't go anywhere. One, um, one interview, and it's memorable to me. I don't remember the guy's name, but I can see it in my head. At the end of the interview, I would typically say, like, you know, do you have any questions, or is there anything else that I should know, type of thing? And he goes, what about anything? And I was like, yeah, I guess.
Sure.
And then he launches into this, you know, just totally inappropriate thing about, you know, today's culture, and we're going to hell in a handbasket and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I mean, it got so bad that I called HR and I was like, I don't know if we have this in our system, but this guy needs to be on like a do not let him in the building anymore type of
Oh
thing.
my.
And the interview wasn't going great before that, but I mean, he took that and drove it right off the cliff, you know?
Wow, I didn't see that coming. I mean, I'll ask for like, what was your greatest achievement? And they'll ask me the question, personal or professional. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, your call, did not see that one coming. Yeah, no, but I
Yeah.
think those that's the power of the open-ended question, right? It's like you let the candidate take it where they're going to go.
Yeah. But even that, right. And I'm not knocking your question, but let's just take the logical extension of that. What's your greatest achievement? They may tell you an amazing, you know, what's my greatest achievement? I don't know, completing a master's degree at 57, you know, and I could tell you that, how does that relate back to the job? And that was one of the things that Amazon did really, really well, is every question they asked you was directly tied to what they expected from you in the duties.
Well, all right. So I'll challenge you, right?
Yeah.
So your greatest achievement being, getting your master's at 57. So
I'm
why
not
is
sure that's
that?
my greatest achievement, but that was
Well, okay.
just
You gave me the bone. I'm going to grab it.
yeah, sure.
But like, I could see you taking that as a candidate, right? Into this is my philosophy of lifelong learning. And and in that case, I have done this in my career, and your job requires stretching into a new, maybe my role in here is I may not have every credential. Like, let's say you're coming in at a defensive posture, you could use that to your advantage.
You know what?
How did I do?
Yes. You know what? I am somebody that can admit when they were wrong, and you gave a better answer to that question than I think that is part of it. And I think what I would say is my greatest achievement is remaining relevant. And that's part of that, right? I have been fortunate to come along at a time where I saw mainframes go into client server, and client server go into internet, and then into the database, and then not only relational database but also non-relational.
Yeah.
And start talking about big data and things like that, and then get into
unstructured data,
into unstructured data, and then into cloud. So if you look at that, if you let's say you got into high tech in the mid 60s, right? You could have gone from 65 to 90, essentially just doing one thing, essentially just, being a Fortran coder or a COBOL coder.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah.
from 90 to, 2025, we've seen, in fact, we moved 4 years ago, and when we moved, I still had my original 286 monochrome laptop, and it still would boot up. I couldn't really do anything with it, but it
Sure.
would still boot up, and I could, type on it, whatever. But, if you just think about everything that has changed just in our generation, and, think, I always give this example, the, so the Wright brothers, 1903, right? They fly. Orville Wright is still alive in 1947 when Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier. And then 22 years later, we go to the moon. And then just, that was in 69. In 80, we were flying back and forth to space. That's the space shuttle. So if you look at, they talk about what's that, Moore's law, right? And that kind of the time frame of things doubling.
Yep.
You've got 44 years to go from first flight to breaking the sound barrier, but then only 22 years to go to the moon, and then only 12 or 13 years to regularly go back and forth. And I think that's analogous to our lives as well. Like, think about how long the centralized one phone in the house rotary dial phone was there from 1950 to 1985, right? Or 1980. And then we go from all that time, and now we've got literally, fifth generation, sixth generation phones that are, internet devices that are, more computing power than, than the Apollo mission, type of stuff.
It's I really thank you for bringing that up, because I hadn't framed it in terms of like our luckiness of our time, right?
Yeah.
Because remaining relevant in this environment, it's tough. Things change so fast, and they're changing even faster.
Yeah.
And now it's all about AI, and it's shocking how, when I look back on the, like, I was just telling a friend about, we used to do, about way back when, this was the red brick days, we would do like proof of concepts.
Yeah.
And, the CIO at Barnes and Noble at the time challenged us, look, if we're doing this marketing modeling and fulfillment modeling to put, whatever is 2,000 stores, and we've got 1 million plus, products. We need to come up with the optimal algorithm for, restocking the books and shelves, right? Problem is, the algorithm takes, on the mainframe, 27 hours to run.
Yeah.
And, we got to do fulfillment tomorrow. So if you guys can cut the time, and it was literally like in under 10 hours.
Yeah.
Where did he get the 10 hours from? One of those, right?
Right.
But
Sure.
we spent a week in a lab with a HP partner, and we did it. It was a bending of a use case, right? But I look back, and it's like, that data that we did for all of their stores for over a year's worth of data is less than what is on this 4 terabyte external drive.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
Think about that. And now I could load that data, it's SSD, right? So I could probably load up those 40, 50 gigs in under a minute. And
and it really depends on what the bottleneck is, right? So if the bottleneck
Exactly.
is the data transmission layer or the data processing layer, think about our ability now to break data into streams, and then we could throw 128 cores against it, and you could probably take that, what took you 10 hours might take 10 minutes or might take an hour. It just depends on where the bottlenecks are.
Well, the interesting thing was with that particular client, after the fact, like after we proved the concept, we got it to working, and you do it in a lab, right?
Yeah.
The consulting company that we were working with, the partner at the time, right? So they took what we did and sort of labbed it, and then they were able to get the incremental. They realized, of course, right? We did it in a lab in a week. They did it, over the course of 6 months, but they got the load times because they went from everything to deltas, and were able to take the time down to 10 minutes, right? Which was a huge achievement in and of itself. But those were great times. But I like, John, it comes back to two things, right? It's the continuous learning and remaining relevant, and try something new. Don't be afraid to try something out. Now, I coach a fair number of folks too, and like particularly for the younger folks, younger early in their careers, I should say, or newly in a career, right, or in a new career. Don't be afraid to try something different. Don't be afraid to take what you've learned, whether it's in school or from a previous experience, and try it.
Yeah.
There's so much to be gained by actually doing the thing, giving it a shot, than talking about it.
Well, my brother came to me with something the other day that he wanted to try, and I had a very honest conversation with him because he's an optimist. He's a dreamer. It served him exceptionally well. He's been very, very successful in the things that he's done. I'm a realist, and he always used to say, if I found a Ferrari for $1, you'd tell me to not buy it. I'm like, you're damn right. I would tell you not to buy it. There's something wrong with that. But our relationship has changed. And I said, look, if you think this is the $1 Ferrari, I'm not going to tell you not to buy it. I'm going to tell you that over the course of your lifetime, you've been able to do things that I couldn't have done that I didn't even think were possible. And so I realize that about myself now, and that's kept me safe. And that safety has benefited me in some ways. It's also cost me in others. And so if you think this is a good chance to take, then I believe in you. And how can I support you?
Yeah, but it's also, I think the other thing you're throwing in there, which is critical, right? Which is knowing yourself. If your tolerance for risk is lower than your, you said your brother-in-law, brother, then embrace that. Like you could be his not alter ego, but like, his checkpoint, and vice versa. Like, you start getting that crazy idea, he's the one who maybe can help you make it come to realization. I think it's just knowing yourself and then having that community of, friends and family or connections or, coworkers, colleagues to bounce these things off of.
I used to say, I joined the Army. He saw the world. I make all the money. He's got all the wealth, so there's something about it.
Interesting. Nice. So, again, I appreciate taking so much of your time today.
Yeah.
If you were to offer advice to your younger self, what would that be?
It's a hard question to answer because I think it's very tempting, right? And yet I wouldn't change anything. If I knew I had the opportunity to end up where I am now, I'd do it all exactly the same. That being said, it'd be super interesting to have 20 years now at Informatica and see, where I could be, or, 25 years at Oracle or something like that. I think that'd be super interesting to join Amazon in 2011 when they were just starting up web services. I think that'd be super interesting. But the types of things that I've gotten to do and the types of adventures that I've gotten to have, nothing. Wouldn't change any of it. And the other thing too, and not to be too macabre, but I also feel like I've done everything I set out to do. I hope I'm around for a lot longer. I've got a lot more to give, but at the same time, I've raised my kids. I've got grandkids. I've provided for my family. I've done what I set out to do, and I'm very proud of that.
That's fantastic. That's a happy man right there. Like
for sure.
If I could ask, how structured were you in your path? Like in terms of like the things you were setting out to do, was it sort of
not at all
loose? Yeah. I'm curious. I'm very curious because some people write it down every year, review their goals and such.
No.
Others are more, I think, like you and I, where it's like, these are the things I want to do.
I have always been opportunistic, and maybe that's why my brother is more successful than I am. But I think I was telling my wife, everything after that initial college experience, in terms of like formal learning, I did out of spite.
Spite?
Yeah. So after 9/11, right? I'm volunteering as a civilian. I'm volunteering for the fire department, and they had this kind of lay citizen volunteer corps that if they had a big disaster, you go direct traffic or do something. Well, we would do all this training, then we wouldn't get to do anything. So I'm like, well, I guess the only way I'm going to get to do some of this fun stuff is like go to the fire academy. So I went to the fire academy and became a volunteer firefighter, and then. To do that, well, I had to become an EMT, but the paramedics were the ones that were getting to do all the cool stuff. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just go to paramedic school. And then, I was working as a tech in the ER, and I got tired of getting pushed around by nurses. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just go to nursing school. Like, how hard can that be? Turns out it was incredibly hard. I would not recommend it, but I got through it, and then I get through nursing school, and it's like, well, that's great, but you're an associate's degree nurse, and all the really good nurses have bachelor's degrees. Like, well, I guess I'll just go get my bachelor's degree again. So then I got a bachelor's degree in nursing, and then I kind of changed career fields, and everybody that I work with is a master's degree, PhD, whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'll go get a master's degree. And then I got, went and got a master's. And now I'm at the point now where it's been long enough. There is one thing I might go do. And that is, I dropped out of an MBA program when, my kids were really young. It was, I think it was actually during the time when I was working at Alpha Blocks, and I was just on the road all the time. And you had to actually go to class, in a building.
Back in the day. Yes.
Back in the day. And now they have enough programs that are remote that I could go do some executive MBA program. And I might just do that out of just, hubris or pride or whatever. But,
well, it doesn't sound like there's any, excuse me, I don't think there's any spite in that.
So, well, I say it very loosely, but why did I go to Oracle? Because a recruiter called me and said there's a job at Oracle. Why did I go to MarkLogic? Because somebody called me and said there's a job in MarkLogic. Why did I go to Web Services? I went to Web Services because my good buddy applied and didn't get the job. And then I said, would you mind if I applied for it? And he said no. And then got the job. But, part of it is now at Thermo Fisher, doing what I do, doing what I love to do, I'm at a point now where I realize that the real opportunity is staying where I'm at. I mean, they could get tired of me and I could be out tomorrow, but my goal is to absolutely ride this one off into the sunset.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, you're enjoying yourself. It's a challenge. You don't have to take any spite PhDs, which is good. I will say, like, I was going to say before, Biedebach doesn't sound Italian at all. Like you're like most Italians I know are motivated by more spite than anything else.
Yes.
So this may not be a nationality thing. This just might be John.
Well, what's funny is I always thought I was German. The last name is heavily German. There's a city in Germany called Biedebach. I took that 23andMe. I'm like 6% German. I'm much more English, Irish, and Scandinavian than I am German. But
yeah, well, there you go. I just want to say thank you again for your time, your contribution, your feedback, your experiences. I really appreciate it.